She is 12 years old, and she does not yet know that today is the last morning she will wake up in her own home. The room is small and smells of damp clay and dried chrysanthemum. Outside, the village moves slowly in the gray pre-dawn light. A rooster, the sound of water being poured, the low murmur of her mother's voice through a thin paper wall. She lies still, her quilted sleeping jacket wrapped tight around her, listening to a world she is about to lose. It is sometime in the early 1400s, deep in the heart of the Ming Dynasty, a dynasty that has declared itself the restorer of Han Chinese greatness after decades of Mongol rule. The Forbidden City has recently been completed in Beijing. Its red walls enclose nearly 180 acres of palaces, gates, courtyards, and gardens. And behind those walls, in the northern half called the Inner Court, lives a world made entirely of women, and the men who were surgically altered to watch over them. Under the Ming emperors, no family is exempt. Every young unmarried girl, from noble households down to modest provincial ones, must present herself for the Junu selection, the choosing of elegant females for the imperial court. The inspection takes place every 3 years. The criteria: age, appearance, behavior, character, physical condition, and above all, obedience. There is no negotiation. There is no refusal. This girl has bound feet. Since the age of 5 or 6, her toes have been folded beneath her foot and wrapped tightly in long cloth strips, then squeezed into embroidered silk shoes no longer than a man's palm. The bones break, they reset. The process repeats over years. The result is what Ming society calls the golden lotus, a foot of roughly 3 inches, considered a mark of refinement and femininity. She cannot walk quickly. She cannot run. She sways when she moves, leaning slightly forward, her weight balanced on her heels and the outer edge of her crushed foot. It is painful in cold weather. She has never known a morning without some ache radiating from her ankles. And yet, her feet are also her social currency. They are the reason a court official will look at her today and nod. The journey to Beijing is long and disorienting. She arrives through the Shenwu Gate, the gate of martial spirit, on the northern end of the Forbidden City. She is one of hundreds of girls waiting in rows, inspected by eunuchs and senior court ladies, examined for skin blemishes, body odor, posture, teeth, and temperament. She has been told not to speak unless spoken to. She has been told not to cry. She does not cry. Inside the palace walls, the architecture is unlike anything she has seen. Red lacquered columns rise to yellow-tiled roofs that curve upward at the corners, gleaming like scales in the morning light. The courtyards are vast and paved in stone, designed to feel overwhelming, and they succeed. The air smells faintly of incense and cedar, of old lacquer, and fresh-cut pine from recent construction. In winter, coal-burning stoves hidden beneath raised brick beds, the Kang, keep the inner chambers warm, filling the rooms with a low, dry heat. She is assigned to one of the 6 western palaces, the residential compounds on the western flank of the inner court, where concubines and imperial consorts live. Her quarters are small. She shares them with other women of similar rank. The walls are painted in muted earth tones, decorated with lacquered furniture in deep red and black, carved with cloud and phoenix motifs. On the shelf above the door, a small carved Buddha sits in silence. The window screens are made of paper, and the light that comes through them in the afternoon is thin and white, like diluted ink. She is now ranked as a low-level consort, one designation among many in the Ming court's loosely defined hierarchy of Fei, Pin, and Fu Ren. Her rank determines everything: the fabric of her robes, the number of servants assigned to her, the quality of her food, whether she will receive visitors, and most crucially, whether the emperor will ever summon her. She dresses each morning in the aokiasen, a layered ensemble of a fitted jacket called the ao over a long pleated skirt called the quan, often in soft blues or greens, never in bright yellow or true red, which are reserved for those of much higher status. Over this she may wear a beizi, a loose, open-fronted outer robe, or a sleeveless bijia vest embroidered with clouds or flowers in silk thread. The fabric choices are strictly regulated. Silk brocade with gold threading is not for her rank, but the embroidery on her collar, small, careful, stitched by her own hands in the long, empty hours, is entirely her own. Her hair is dressed into a smooth bun, pinned with silver ornaments, lacquered in place. Her face is powdered white with lead-based powder, a practice common among court women, though its slow toxicity is not understood. Her eyebrows are shaved and redrawn in high, delicate arches. Her lips are colored with a small dot of deep rouge, not covering the full mouth, but placed precisely at the center, like a blossom pressed into paper. She looks beautiful. She looks like the court requires her to look. She cannot always tell the difference. The days inside the Forbidden City have a structure, but they do not feel purposeful. They feel suspended. She rises before dawn, washes with water carried in a ceramic basin by a maid younger than herself. The coal stove is already warm. Breakfast is simple: rice porridge with pickled vegetables and perhaps a soft-boiled egg, eaten in near silence. Meals eaten in the presence of senior consorts require perfect posture and no sound of chewing. Even alone, the habits hold. The mornings belong to needlework and painting. She practices jeiti, a form of embroidery that requires splitting single silk threads into even finer strands, then stitching landscapes, birds, or flowers with a precision that can take weeks for a single panel. The light in her chamber is never quite enough, and her eyes ache by mid-morning, but needlework is one of the few activities that belong entirely to her. No one can take it away while her fingers are moving. In the afternoons, some women gather to play Wakey, the ancient strategy board game, or to practice calligraphy on thin rice paper. Others write poetry, and this is not a minor point. Ming court women were not expected to be uneducated. Some were accomplished poets and painters, but their work circulated only within the walls. There was no outside audience. There was no outside. The eunuchs are everywhere. By the end of the 15th century, there are said to be 10,000 of them within the palace complex. They manage the women's schedules, carry messages between courts, control access to the emperor, and report upward on everything they observe. They are not cruel, always. Some are protective, some are allies. Some have been known to accept bribes in exchange for arranging a woman to be brought to the emperor's attention. Their power over the women of the inner court is absolute and unspoken. The women know this. They navigate it the way one navigates a room with no clear light source, carefully, slowly, always aware of the walls. The question that hangs over every day, unasked and unanswered: will the emperor summon her tonight? The selection process for a night visit from the emperor is one of the most documented and most dehumanizing rituals of Ming court life. When the time comes, a woman is bathed, examined by a court physician, and carried to the emperor's sleeping quarters. Carried, because her bound feet cannot carry her efficiently across the long stone corridors in the dark. She is wrapped in a robe and brought in through a side entrance. The eunuchs time the visit. She does not stay until morning. If she conceives, and if the child is a son, everything changes. She rises through the ranks. She receives more space, finer cloth, better food. The mother of an emperor's son commands respect that no amount of personal talent or beauty could purchase on its own. This is the axis around which her entire existence rotates, the possibility of a male heir. But most women in the inner court never receive a summons at all. Some spend their entire lives inside the red walls without once entering the emperor's presence. They grow old among the same courtyards, the same paper windows, the same women they arrived with. When they are around 30, considered past their prime, lower-ranked concubines are sometimes reassigned to laundry duties or domestic service. They cannot remarry a man from the imperial court. They remain, in a sense, permanently claimed by an arrangement that never fully claimed them. There are also darker realities beneath the gilded surface. During the Ming Dynasty, some emperors held thousands of concubines. Figures as high as 9,000 have been recorded, though such numbers strain credibility. What is recorded more reliably is the competition, the intrigue, the psychological pressure of living in permanent proximity to rivals who share the exact same goal. Arguments, alliances, small cruelties, quiet desperation. These were, according to contemporary accounts, constant features of palace life. One written account, left by a concubine named Lady Kawi, describes the execution of 16 women by white silk nooses in the halls of the Forbidden City on the day of Emperor Yongl's funeral. Human sacrifice attached to imperial funerals, a practice from earlier eras, had not entirely vanished. There is a particular kind of silence that lives inside a beautiful cage. These women knew it intimately. Stand outside the Forbidden City today, and you will see tourists passing through the Meridian Gate, guidebooks open, cameras raised. The courtyards are the same. The yellow rooftops still catch the afternoon sun in the same way they did 600 years ago. The red walls have not moved. What is harder to see, what requires something more than a map, is the women's world that existed here for nearly 3 centuries. The 6 eastern and 6 western palaces, now converted into exhibition halls housing bronze vessels and porcelain, were once places of intense, claustrophobic human experience. The narrow passages connecting the palaces, still visible today, give some sense of how limited that world was in physical terms. Each palace courtyard was, in effect, a small neighborhood where a woman might spend decades. The Ming Dynasty concubine story is not a single story. It is a spectrum. At one end, women of exceptional intelligence or political instincts managed to accumulate real power, influencing succession, cultivating alliances with eunuchs and court officials, shaping policy through proximity to the emperor. The Empress Dowager, in particular, could command authority that few officials could contest. At the other end of the spectrum, there were thousands of women who left no record at all, whose names never appeared in court documents, whose faces were never painted, whose voices we can only imagine by reading between the lines of the histories that overlook them. The practice of foot binding, so central to a woman's social value in this era, would continue in China in various forms for centuries after the Ming Dynasty ended in 1644. It was not fully abolished until the 20th century. The requirement to bear sons above all else, to define one's worth through reproductive success, has echoes in social systems that persisted long after the Forbidden City stopped housing an emperor. The particular combination of enclosure, hierarchy, and female competition described in Ming court records is a pattern that reappears, in different forms, under different names, across many cultures and many centuries. What changes is the scale of the walls. What stays is the question of how much space a woman is permitted to occupy, literally, socially, intellectually, publicly. The girl from the provincial village, carried through the Shenwu Gate at 12 years old, could not have imagined a world where that question might be answered differently. But she lived inside it fully, with whatever grace and strategy and quiet resilience the walls allowed. That is perhaps the most honest thing that can be said about women's history. It is rarely a history of freedom, and yet it is always a history of survival. Do you have a suggestion for the next video? You can comment on it. I'd be happy to bring it to life.